Welcome to Tales of the Bard. Step into a world where stories come alive and imagination knows no bounds. Join me as I weave enchanting tales reminiscent of the bards of old, sharing legends, myths, and original stories that will transport you to distant lands and forgotten times. But who is the real Jonty? Jonty the Bard was a familiar figure in taverns across the kingdom, his lute slung over his shoulder, his voice a comforting sound amidst the clamor of the crowd. But behind the warm smile and the seemingly carefree life of a traveling musician, Jonty was more than just a teller of tales. He was a spy, a man of secrets, deeply loyal to King Allistair and the realm. He lived in the shadows of his stories, using his position as a bard to move unnoticed, gathering whispers and truths that others overlooked. Jonty's early life. Jonty was born in a small village on the outskirts of the kingdom, far from the bustling cities and royal courts. His father was a wandering minstrel, a man who traveled from town to town, filling taverns with music and stories. Jonty grew up watching his father play, learning to strum the lute and sing ballads before he could read or write. His mother, though kind and loving, was quiet, always watching the world around her with sharp eyes. It was from her that Jonty learned the value of listening, not just to music, but to people, to the conversations that took place in dark corners, and to the unspoken words that passed between glances. As he grew older, Jonty's natural charm and musical talent led him to follow in his father's footsteps. He became a bard, traveling across the kingdom, playing in taverns and courts, earning his keep with stories and songs. But it wasn't long before his keen mind and ability to blend into the background caught the attention of King Allistair, a spy in plain sight. King Allistair had always been a shrewd ruler, knowing that to keep his kingdom safe, he needed eyes and ears in every corner of the land. He saw in Jonty an opportunity, a man who could move unnoticed, who could be both part of the crowd and apart from it, who could listen without being heard. And so, Jonty became more than just a bard. He became a spy, a trusted informant for the king. As a traveling musician, Jonty had access to places where other spies might be seen as suspicious. Taverns, inns, market squares, he was welcome in them all, with no one ever thinking twice about his presence. His lute was his cover, and his songs were a distraction that allowed him to gather information. While the crowds were enthralled by his stories, he was quietly listening to theirs, picking up on the murmurs of rebellion, rumors of enemy movements, and the whispered plots of the hag-born witches. A meeting with Ronan. It was during one of these missions that Jonty first met Ronan, the young druid who would one day become one of the kingdom's greatest defenders. Jonty had been playing in a tavern near the Druid Grove, passing through as part of his usual route, when he overheard a conversation between two men who spoke of strange happenings in the forest. They mentioned a young man, a druid in training, who had been seen speaking to the trees, commanding the animals, and wielding a power that hadn't been seen in generations. Intrigued, Jonty decided to investigate. Disguised as a simple traveler, he followed the rumors until he found Ronan, deep in the woods, practicing his druidic magic. Jonty, ever the diplomat, introduced himself not just as a bard, but as a man who served King Allistair in more ways than one. He offered his services to Ronan, recognizing that the young druid's power could be a key factor in protecting the kingdom from the growing threat of the hag-born witches and other dark forces. From that day forward, Jonty became a liaison between Ronan and the king, passing information between the two. He shared what he heard in the taverns, rumors of dark magic, the movements of enemy forces, and the growing influence of the hag-born. In return, Ronan trusted him with news from the Druid Grove, allowing Jonty to carry messages to the king and even to the paladins of the sacred flame. A trusted informant. Jonty's network of information wasn't limited to Ronan. He had contacts among the paladins, especially Sir Aldrich Dawnshield, whose holy order had long been on the front lines of the battle against dark magic. Jonty's travels took him to the paladin stronghold on several occasions, where he would relay important information gathered from his journeys, news of necromancer cults, movements of hag-born forces, and even whispers of rebellion within the kingdom. Despite his position as a spy, Jonty remained loyal to the kingdom and to King Allistair above all else. His life as a bard allowed him to navigate the delicate political landscape with ease, moving between the nobles, the common folk, and the druids without raising suspicion. But it wasn't just loyalty that drove him. It was a genuine love for the kingdom he had grown up in, and a desire to protect it from the shadows that threatened to consume it. A master of deception. Jonty was a master of deception, able to play the role of the carefree minstrel while hiding the sharp mind of a spy beneath the surface. He often pretended to be more interested in ale and merrymaking than in the secrets being whispered around him, but his sharp ears missed nothing. He would offer a friendly smile and a bawdy song to the tavern crowd, all the while listening to the hushed conversations happening in the corners. His skills went beyond gathering information. Jonty was also adept at planting false rumors when necessary. At King Allistair's command, Jonty would spread stories designed to mislead the kingdom's enemies, steering them away from the king's true plans or causing divisions within their ranks. His role as a bard made it easy to pass off these rumors as idle gossip, and few ever questioned the truth of his tales. Loyal to the kingdom. Though Jonty lived a life of deception and intrigue, his loyalty to King Allistair and the kingdom never wavered. He believed in the greater good, knowing that the secrets he uncovered and the lies he told were all in service of protecting the realm from the growing darkness. His work was often thankless and dangerous. He had been in more than one situation where a careless word could have cost him his life, but Jonty understood the importance of his role. Despite his covert work, Jonty remained close to the people he served. He shared a special bond with Ronan, respecting the young Druid's power and his connection to the natural world. He admired Sir Aldrich's unwavering faith and strength, and he often found himself drawn to the company of the paladins, where the light of their holy magic was a welcome contrast to the shadows he so often inhabited. A Bard's Tale. Now, Jonty continues his work traveling from town to town, tavern to tavern, collecting information, passing messages, and doing his part to protect the kingdom. To most, he is just a bard, a man with a lute and a talent for storytelling. But to those who know him well, he is a trusted ally, a man who walks the fine line between light and shadow, between truth and deception, all in service of the realm. He may be a spy, but Jonty's greatest weapon is his loyalty. And as the kingdom faces its greatest threats, from the hag-born witches to the dark forces gathering in the west, Jonty will continue to do what he does best: watch, listen, and fight with words, secrets, and songs. The tavern was bustling with the usual clamor of music, laughter, and conversation. Jonty, seated at his usual spot near the fire, played a few cheerful tunes on his lute, his sharp eyes scanning the room for any newcomers. It was part of his routine, part of his unspoken duty to King Allistair, to keep an ear out for strangers who might bring trouble to the town. And tonight, he had already spotted a few fresh faces. Among them was a tall, rough-looking man with a crooked grin and an air of cocky confidence. He had slipped into the tavern quietly, but had immediately started ordering rounds of ale for himself and the few companions he was with. They sat in the shadows, speaking in hushed voices, but Jonty's trained ears caught snippets of conversation that piqued his interest, mentions of easy pickings and rich hauls. Jonty's lute continued to hum with a lively tune, his fingers effortlessly moving over the strings as he watched the group from the corner of his eye. He knew how to handle situations like this. He had done it 1,000 times before, weaving his way into conversations, making himself seem like nothing more than a friendly bard eager to share a drink and hear a good story. But tonight, his goal was clear: find out who these men were and what they wanted in town. The setup. After finishing his song to a round of applause, Jonty made his way to the bar, flashing his usual charming smile at the tavern owner, who gave him a knowing nod. The bartender understood Jonty's role in the kingdom's security, though the details were never openly discussed. As Jonty ordered another drink, he subtly motioned toward the table where the newcomers sat. "They look like they could use a few more drinks, don't you think?" Jonty said casually, sliding a few coins across the counter. The bartender chuckled. Sure. You've got that look in your eye, Jonty. Up to something again?" Jonty winked but said nothing more. He waited for the drinks to be prepared, and as they were set on the bar, he slipped a small vial from his pocket. This was the potion Ronan had given him, a subtle brew made from herbs and enchanted plants, designed to loosen tongues without the drinker realizing. It wasn't magic that would make anyone confess their deepest secrets outright, but it made people more open, more talkative, and far more likely to slip up if they had something to hide. Carefully, Jonty added a few drops to each mug before picking up the tray. and carrying it over to the newcomer's table with a grin. "Evening, friends. Saw you were running low on drinks and I thought I'd offer a round on me," he said cheerfully. The leader of the group, the tall man with the crooked grin, looked up and raised an eyebrow. "What's the catch, Bard?" Jonty laughed easily, setting the drinks down. "No catch, just being neighborly. You seem like the kind of men with interesting stories, and I like hearing stories. Plus, it's always nice to make a few new friends." The men exchanged glances, but the offer of free drinks was too good to pass up. The leader shrugged and picked up his mug. "Why not? A drink's a drink." He took a long gulp, his companions following suit. Jonty smiled to himself as he watched the potions start to take effect, then sat down with them, his lute resting casually across his lap. The conversation unfolds. For a while, Jonty played the role of the friendly bard, chatting about the town, sharing a few harmless stories, and letting the men relax. As the drinks flowed, he could see the subtle change in their demeanor. Their laughter came more easily, their words less guarded. It was time to strike. "So," Jonty said after a while, leaning back in his chair, "you're not from around here, are you? Just passing through?" The leader, now grinning more widely than before, shrugged. "Something like that. Got a few business opportunities we're looking into." Jonty raised an eyebrow, feigning curiosity. "Business, eh? Must be some good pickings in a place like this." The man chuckled darkly. "More than you'd think, Bard. More than you'd think." He leaned in, lowering his voice, but clearly more comfortable than he should have been. "Let's just say there's some easy money to be made in a place where people don't lock their doors." Jonty kept his expression neutral, though his mind was already working. These men were thieves, likely part of a Thieves Guild looking to scout the town for opportunities. "Sounds like you've got yourself a pretty nice setup," Jonty said, keeping his tone light. "But how do you find these places? Must take some planning." The man took another drink, his inhibitions slipping further. "Planning's easy when you got connections, you know? You gotta know who to pay off and who to scare. Most folk don't put up much of a fight if they think you're dangerous enough. And well, we've got a reputation." Jonty nodded, his fingers lightly tapping the lute in a rhythmic pattern. "A reputation, huh? You must be someone important then." The man puffed out his chest, clearly proud. "Damn right I am. I'm the leader of the guild. We're looking to expand, you know? Find a few new spots where the guards aren't paying attention, places where the folks are rich but careless. This town's got potential." Jonty's smile didn't falter, though inside he was already planning his next move. The town was under threat, but now he had what he needed: the name of the leader, the nature of their operation, and the fact that they were planning a series of robberies. He would need to pass this information on to King Allistair, to Ronan, and possibly even to the paladins. This was bigger than just a group of petty thieves. This was an organized guild, and they were looking to take advantage of the kingdom's growing tensions. The escape. After a few more rounds of conversation, Jonty excused himself with a friendly wave, leaving the thieves to their drinks. He slipped back to the bar, his mind racing with the details he had gathered. "Get word to the guards," he whispered to the bartender. "Quietly. We've got some thieves in town and we need to make sure they don't get too comfortable." The bartender nodded, his face serious. Jonty left the tavern shortly after, his lute slung over his back, and made his way through the darkened streets. The information he had gathered would be invaluable, but he had to move fast. He needed to meet with Ronan and pass along the details before the thieves could make their move. As he walked, Jonty smiled to himself. His cover as a bard had served him well once again, and thanks to Ronan's potion, the thieves had revealed more than they ever intended. By the time they realized their mistake, it would be too late. Back in the tavern, the leader of the thieves chuckled to himself, raising his mug for another drink. Little did he know the game was already up, and Jonty, the seemingly harmless bard, was already 2 steps ahead. The tavern had quieted down for the night, but Jonty, ever vigilant, was already on his next task. The information he'd gathered from the thieves was too important to delay, and his next stop would be King Allistair's chambers. As he hurried down the darkened streets, his lute strapped across his back, Jonty's mind raced through the details he'd uncovered. He had to move fast. Every minute counted. The moonlight filtered through the trees as Jonty approached the Druid Grove on the outskirts of town. His steps were quick but deliberate, knowing that every second he saved could mean the difference between catching the thieves before their plan unfolded or letting them slip away. As he reached the edge of the forest, a faint rustling caught his ear, and suddenly he felt a familiar presence. Skryla. She appeared as if she had always been there, stepping gracefully from behind a tall, ancient tree, her elven form shimmering in the moonlight. Her long silver hair fell over her shoulders, and her piercing eyes glowed faintly with a magic that was far older than Jonty could comprehend. She moved so naturally, as if she had simply materialized from the bark itself, or perhaps she had. Jonty could never be sure with Skryla. One moment she was part of the natural world, the next she stood before him like a regal elven queen. He stumbled to find his words. "Skryla, I need to speak with you. It's urgent." His voice was hurried, a stark contrast to Skryla's calm, timeless presence. Skryla tilted her head slightly, her eyes locking onto his. "What is it, Jonty?" "The thieves, the guild. I think they're planning something big, and it's not just about the town. They're looking to expand. I need to get word to the king, but I don't have time. There's no telling how soon they'll make their move." Skryla listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. After a moment, she nodded and stepped closer to one of the blue trees in the grove. The tree glowed faintly, its bark tinged with a bluish hue, its roots connected to the vast blue tree network that spanned across the kingdom. She placed a delicate hand on its trunk, and the faint glow brightened. Without saying a word, Skryla began to send her message. Jonty watched in awe. He had never fully understood how the network worked, but he knew it was a powerful tool for the Druids, allowing them to communicate across vast distances with ease. It was as though the trees themselves whispered the words, carrying them on the wind to those who needed to hear them. But then, something unusual happened. As Skryla's hand rested on the tree, a cat appeared out of nowhere, materializing from the shadows as if it had always been there. Its fur was a deep midnight black, with gleaming green eyes that seemed to glow with an eerie intelligence. The cat padded silently up to Skryla, and she looked down at it, her lips moving as though she were speaking to the creature. The words were quiet, too soft for Jonty to hear, but the cat's ears twitched in response, as if it understood every word. Was Skryla actually talking to the cat? Jonty wasn't sure. He had seen strange things in his time as a bard and spy, especially when dealing with the Druids and their magic, but this was something different. The cat seemed more than just an animal. It was as if it were a part of the Blue Tree network itself, a messenger or familiar that carried secrets across the land. Skryla glanced up at Jonty, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the moon. "The message has been sent," she said simply, her voice calm but with a faint edge of urgency. "The Druids and the king will know what's coming." Jonty exhaled in relief. "Thank you, Skryla. I wasn't sure I could make it to the king in time." Skryla gave him a small, knowing smile. "The trees are faster than any horse or messenger. You did well to come to me." She knelt down, giving the cat a gentle scratch behind the ears, and it purred softly before disappearing into the shadows once more, as silently as it had arrived. Jonty blinked, trying to comprehend what he had just witnessed. Had the cat delivered the message? Was it more than just a creature? But as always with Skryla, there was a fine line between what was real and what was magic. "Who was that?" Jonty asked, hesitating as he gestured toward the now empty space where the cat had stood. Skryla's smile widened, just a hint of mystery in her expression. "The forests have many allies, Jonty. Some are more visible than others. You needn't worry. The message will reach its destination, and the king will be prepared." Before Jonty could ask more, Skryla stepped back toward the tree. She placed her hand on the trunk once again, and in a single graceful motion, she seemed to meld with it, her body dissolving into the bark like water flowing into the earth. It was as though she had become part of the tree itself, disappearing as quickly as she had appeared. One moment she was there, the next she was gone, flying away, carried by the magic of the Blue Tree network. Jonty stood there for a moment, stunned, though not entirely surprised by Skryla's departure. She always had a way of leaving him with more questions than answers, but the important thing was that the message had been sent. The king would know about the thieves' plot, and Ronan and the Druids would be ready. Whatever came next, Jonty had done his part. With a final glance at the glowing tree, Jonty turned and headed back toward the village. The night was far from over, but for now at least, the kingdom had gained a valuable advantage. And as he walked, Jonty couldn't help but wonder, Just how many eyes and ears were watching over the kingdom? In the trees, in the shadows, even in the form of a simple cat, the Druids' network was everywhere. As always, Jonty smiled to himself. The world was filled with mysteries, and tonight he had been given a glimpse of just how deep those mysteries ran.